Welcome back to ReadingBear. Today, we will take a look at some new ProRevenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, Steal My Parking Spot? Get your Lexus caught on fire. And you thought it was an exaggeration? Nope. While not as nuclear as some stories I've read, proportionate to the crime, I'd say this counts. Year 2000. I'm living in a crappy apartment over a storefront, so parking was limited. Now, this was the middle of winter, and I didn't have a car at that period in my life, but my girlfriend at the time did. She was coming over in a couple of hours, and finding parking on the street is a gamble, so I wanted to dig out a parking spot for her out of the snowbank in the alley behind my building. I didn't own a snow shovel, so using a hammer, old plastic ice cream bucket, and my bare hands, I dug out a chunk about 3 meters by 2 meters by 2 meters to make room for her to park. I don't know if you can appreciate how much snow that is, but it was a lot of work, especially considering my lack of proper equipment. This isn't freshly fallen snow either, this is snowbank packed by a plow. Practically ice. But whatever, we do crazy things for love, right? But apparently, I had too much faith in humanity. I thought the cardboard sign I left in the newly cleared parking spot that said, "I spent an hour and a half digging this out for someone specific, please do not park here," would be enough. Nope. Wouldn't be writing this if it had been. Naturally, some idiot of a Lexus owner threw the sign in the dumpster and stole the spot. I remember it was red. I hadn't told my girlfriend about my plan to dig out the parking spot, mostly because I didn't want to look like a wuss if it was too much work and I gave up. So, I just stewed on it, imagining all the things I could do. My girlfriend ended up finding a spot on the street a block away, and we had a good evening anyway. She had to work the next day, so she took off around 2 a.m., and I stayed up until maybe around 4 a.m. The car was still there, and I was still upset. By this time, all the bars were closed, the neighbors were asleep, and the streets were quiet. I couldn't ask for a better opportunity to ruin someone's crap. I went outside with a bottle of anhydrous isopropanol I kept around as a solvent, doused the car's tires, and set them on fire. I nabbed the cardboard sign from the dumpster and used it to quickly scrape the snow and cover my tracks, then took it back inside with me. No point leaving evidence behind. Over the course of the next few minutes, I heard bang, kapow, blam, boom, as the tires burst one by one. I had honestly expected the whole car to go up in flames, but each burst was apparently forceful enough to put out each individual tire, as well as blast out a sizable divot in the snowpack. Nothing happened until the next day, but police were eventually called. They were knocking on doors, asking if anyone saw something. Nope, sorry, must have slept right through it. Good luck, officer. Hope you catch the guy. I turned on my police scanner to keep tabs on things, mostly out of fear of getting caught. But there were no witnesses, and I learned the owner only had liability insurance. What kind of idiot buys a Lexus but not full coverage? I would soon find out. When I went outside to survey my handiwork under the guise of taking out the trash and being a curious resident, oh man, yeah, that guy was gonna need to get his whole car resprayed. The car looked fine structurally, but I did probably more than $2,000 worth of cosmetic damage, not to mention needing 4 new tires. I also got a look at the guy who owned the car, and the image I had created in my head of what a person would look like that would so unapologetically steal someone's hard work, was completely accurate. He was a grade A, first class, board certified, textbook D** douchebag. Orange fake tan, way too much hair product, leather pants, weapons grade D** butchery, a decade before Jersey Shore was a thing. I regret nothing. Never saw that car again. Got away scot-free. The next one is titled, Don't Want to Share the Road? Here, you can just crash into a cop car. First, a little backstory. I'm a college student and cycle to campus every day. It's not a long ride at all, but I have to go through a zone where it's illegal to ride a bicycle on the sidewalk, so I'm forced to ride on the road. Most drivers don't care and just go around me since I stay to the edge and don't make myself a nuisance. Also, I have a sh*TTY air bike that I commute on, this will be important later. A few weeks ago, a guy in a Ford SUV, I don't know exactly which kind, started yelling at me as he drove by while I was in the road-only zone. All the usual, get off the road, roads are for cars, you're too slow, kinda stuff. I get that from drivers on a weekly basis, I just ignore and keep going. This man was special though, since he cut right in front of me and slammed on his brakes after yelling. I was able to stop before I hit him, and he floored it out of there, yelling, "Better be careful next time, bike." I was pretty mad, but I hadn't got his license plate or anything, and I doubt anything could be done about it anyway. There was no real proof. Over lunch, I told one of my friends who works as an EMT the story, and he got seriously upset. Apparently he has seen the results of a car successfully brake checking on a cyclist, and they aren't pretty. 2 days later, the same Ford SUV jerk tried to brake check me again. I was expecting it as soon as I heard him yelling, "Get on the sidewalk, bike," from behind, so I avoided a crash again. I told my EMT friend over lunch again, and he was even angrier than before. I wanted to let it go since I can't really do anything about him, and my bicycle isn't going to win in a crash. This guy keeps trying to brake check me every few days during my morning commute, whenever we're on the same patch of road at the same time. About a week ago, my EMT friend told me that he told my story to one of his friends in the campus police, who was equally upset. The two of them wanted to catch this jerk driver. The plan was to have the policeman parked on the side of the road in hopes of catching and pulling over the jerk. I heartily agreed, and the officer pulled some strings and had himself posted on speeder catching duty for that stretch of road. A few days passed uneventfully, with no sign of the road rager. I saw the cop parked in the same spot on the side of the road every day, a spot where the road has a left turn lane and a straight line. Finally, I'm pedaling along and I hear the familiar voice scream, "Get the hell off the road, idiot." I yelled back, "Catch me then," and took off. I was spinning my scrawny little chicken legs as hard as they would go and pegged the throttle. I guess this made the driver even angrier because I heard his engine roar as he pursued me. He shifted into the left lane as I stayed in the right. I looked to the side and saw a nasty-ass old man in the driver's seat, with the passenger window open. His mouth was going like he was yelling, but I couldn't hear him over the wind noise. I saw the police car's spot approaching and started to slow down. Taking the opportunity, the driver swung right in front of me. I don't know if it was the speed or his anger that made him swing wide, but he cut across my lane and crashed straight into the back of the police car. I barely applied my brakes, slowed down to about 15 miles per hour, and crashed into the side of his car. The officer got out, spitting mad would be an understatement, and called an ambulance and another police car. Everyone was unhurt since the jerk was going only like 25 miles per hour, but there was enough of an impact to trigger the SUV's airbags. The jerk ended up getting arrested for driving drunk, seriously, who drinks before 9 a.m., for an illegal lane change, and probably other stuff too. I don't know all the details. I imagine that causing a crash like that would entail some additional charges. The guy ended up having to pay for extensive repairs on the police cruiser and for a new airbike to replace the one he destroyed by cutting in front of me. The frame snapped. On top of that, I hear that his car was defined as totaled by his insurance company since the airbags went off, so he also has to pay for a new car. With any luck, he'll lose his license from the drunk driving charges and won't be able to menace cyclists again. The next one is titled, "Steal a Paper from My Desk? Kiss Your New Toy Robot Goodbye." I'd like to start off by saying, I now know what I did was wrong and you're on my side. When I was in first grade, my teacher was a small, bitter old woman who terrified me. Let's call her Ms. Skeletor. On the first day of school, Ms. Skeletor handed us a small calendar booklet and a sheet of paper with a bunch of different squares with pictures of types of weather. Every morning we were supposed to cut out a square based on what their weather was like and glue it on the day. Simple. About a week into school, I reach into my desk and pull out my little calendar, but I can't find the paper with the weather pictures. I'm of course confused since it never left my desk, so I walk around the room and ask kids around me if they've seen it. Still nothing. I'm not worried at this point because it had my name on it and my naive 6-year-old brain thought, if someone found it they'll give it back soon. Yeah, no. For the rest of the year, I'm getting mild panic attacks for the first 5 minutes of class cause I don't have this stupid weather chart and I'm too scared to ask Ms. Skeletor for a new one. This goes on for the entire year. Every time someone asks where my weather chart is, I Matrix Neo dodge the question, probably not, since I was 6, but back then I thought I was slick. Eventually, it's the last day of school and we're packing up our stuff to take home with us. Everyone is excited cause we're allowed to play outside with toys we brought from home. I'm relieved because I'll never have to face Ms. Skeletor or my blank weather chart again. This is where the pettiness comes in. This kid walked up to me as I'm packing up. Let's call him Goblin. Now Goblin was one of those kids that no one in the class liked. He would always be alone at recess, but whenever you invited him to play tag, he would soon storm off saying we were cheating. He was also rude, disruptive in class, and all around a nasty kid. Goblin walks up to me and thrusts this old, hole-filled paper in my face. I turn it over and lo and behold, it's my missing weather chart. I'm so shocked I can't say anything. Goblin responds to my silence by spitting out, "Sorry, I just borrowed it. Last time I checked, you don't borrow something from someone for a year without saying anything by taking it out of their ducking desk." So, I snapped. Later, when we were on the playground, I found Goblin playing by himself, of course, with his brand new toy robot that he had been talking up for a week before. I ripped the toy out of his hands, sprinted to the side of the playground adjacent to the street, and hurled it as hard as I could up in the air. The robot, of course, shattered in the middle of the street, just like Goblin's heart. This kid is now sobbing, staring at what is left of the robot. It's at this point I should have walked away. Revenge over. But no. To twist the knife even further, I walk over to Goblin, still sobbing, lean in and say, "I'm just borrowing it." Yeah, obviously I was possessed by a demon that day. But I never saw Goblin after that. I heard he moved, but I don't know where. It's been over a decade and I'm pretty sure Goblin is looking to murder me. The last one is titled, "Mess with the Crew," and the crew will mess right back. Back in the early 90s, I got a gig working as a front-of-house sound engineer on a major 10-day music and arts festival in London's Docklands with some 15 stages dotted all around the waterfront. All of the crew working the stages were either experienced theatre techs and or had loads of experience working major outside events, which is the reason we were hired. As an aside, this festival was to celebrate the culmination of a massive investment in the redevelopment of this area of East London, itself the former site of one of the largest dock complexes in the world. I was tasked with running FOH sound on one of the largest stages. Normally, events like this are loads of fun to work, but within 2 days it became apparent that the organizers had 1, no idea of how to run major outside events, and 2, had not the faintest idea of how to book acts and schedule same. In particular, we also had to contend with some woman from Docklands' middle management team who had been given the job of overseeing our particular stage, a person who not only had rapidly proved to be totally ignorant of any aspect of managing outside events, but also someone for whom the word entitled had been invented. Our stage was licensed to run events from midday until 10 p.m, but we rarely had a full day's worth of events for punters to enjoy, due to the aforementioned incompetence with booking. Still, not our problem, we'll just work with what's given us. On Thursday, we had scheduled an evening of old-time Victorian music hall which featured, as a special guest, a very famous film and TV actress. Her performance rider required a grand piano. For some unfathomable reason, and again due to the incompetence of the organizers, the piano, a full-size Yamaha concert grand, arrived from the hiring company on Tuesday. This was a remarkably stupid idea for any number of reasons. Due to operational considerations, we had to store the piano in the backstage area where it spent 2 days suffering in the heat of the day despite our best efforts to shield it. As any piano technician, tuner will tell you, this is an extremely bad idea, especially with an instrument worth close to £100,000. Almost as bad was the fact that our area was little more than a roughly graded building site. The ground was covered in hardcore rubble fragments around the size of hen's eggs, very uncomfortable to walk around on, even with proper work boots, which also kicked up loads of dust and other detritus. Not the sort of crap you want floating about gumming up the works of a very expensive concert grand. Now let me properly set the scene. It's midsummer, very hot, and our venue is a large circus-style tent with around 800 seat capacity. The cast of the show, along with our august star, was due to turn up at around 1 p.m. to conduct a production rehearsal so we could sort out sound and lighting cues for the show. The main cast duly turns up on time, and we start sorting out their technical requirements, pretty simple and nothing that we're not used to. At about 1:30 p.m., our star turns up sporting dark glasses and immaculate couture. As anyone who's worked in this industry knows, the initial interaction with a major A-list star vis-a-vis their technical requirements can go one of 2 ways, full Monty Diva, or let's go with what we have. Her first demand was that the piano is dropped off the front of the stage so that she could maintain an eye line whilst standing right downstage, both with her pianist and with the audience. The stage was about 4.5 feet above ground level and would have required at least 8 burly lads to safely shift a full-size concert grand off the deck. Also not a good idea since it had been tuned that morning, and moving it would have almost certainly caused the tuning to go out of whack. I delicately pointed out that doing so would be in direct violation of both health and safety, and fire regulations, as per our written policy, as it would have put the piano in both the fire lane and close to one of the primary emergency exits from the venue. Thinking rapidly, I then suggested that we place the piano as far downstage as physically possible and that she page herself 3 or 4 feet upstage so that she could still glance over and take cues from her MD whilst still taking in the audience. The tension was palpable. After a few seconds consideration she replied, "No problem, I can work with that." Phew. No sooner than this crisis had been averted than the Docklands rep rocked up. I remind you, gentle reader, that this person had absolutely zero knowledge about how to run an outside event. She had also been a major thorn in our side for the previous week, trying to micro-manage proceedings in the venue in order to big herself up in front of her bosses. We, of course, completely ignored her suggestions, but in such a way as made her think she was in charge. Trust me, she wasn't. She had also been inexcusably rude to virtually every single member of the crew from day one, and had over the days previous reduced several of them to tears. Production crews don't take kindly to our own being treated in such a cavalier fashion, and while we're generally fairly thick-skinned, there comes point where we want to get our own back. Believe me, after a week of constant abuse, we were coming up with creative ways of disposing of the body. Although we didn't realize it at the time, our savior was at hand, but I digress. Obviously starstruck, she announced in gushing tones that she would be taking personal charge of our star's every need and that we were not to concern ourselves with that aspect. Indeed, we were to keep our place, as we were only the hired help. Our stage manager, who was at that time sweeping the stage, bridled at the suggestion and made as if to use his broom to beat the brains out of this woman. I had to step in front of him as unobtrusively as possible and stop him from burying the woman right there and then. "She ain't worth it, mate." She then swanned off, leaving our star slack-jawed in amazement. She then turned to me and said, "Is that ducking woman for real?" I replied, "Darling, you have no idea," at which point she laughed uproariously. I gave our star a brief summary of the previous few days' farragoes and instantly, she became one of us, and from then on we were all on first-name terms. We then ran a full tech rehearsal from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m., sorted out all our cues and then repaired to the beer tent with the cast for a spot of late lunch and a drink or two. The show was scheduled to kick off at 7:30 p.m. At around 6 p.m., the harridan reappeared to overlook the situation. She noticed that we had all the sides of the tent raised in order to get some air flowing through. Remember, it's midsummer and it's currently low to mid-80s. She then demanded that all of the tent flaps be lowered because she wanted a more theater atmosphere and the light spilling through the side walls would spoil the effect. Despite pointing out that dropping the tent sides would significantly raise the temperature in the venue, she demanded the sides be dropped, so despite our earnest advice to the contrary, we reluctantly complied. At around 7 p.m., we saw 8 50-seat coaches arrive. To our amazement, out from the coaches came an entire flotilla of old-age pensioners, many on Zimmer frames, who proceeded to shuffle their way into the tent across the hardcore rubble underfoot. We discovered later that the organizers had forgotten to advertise the event anywhere. Seriously? And in desperation, had gone around to all the local Darby and Joan clubs a couple of days before handing out free tickets and laying on transport in order to have an audience. So now we have 400-odd OAPs frantically fanning themselves with anything to hand as the temperature climbs ever higher. We start the show, everything's going fine, but the mercury in the thermometer I have strapped to the FOH rack is slowly going up and up. It's so hot up at the sound desk that I'm down to my shorts. By the end of Act 1, the temperature has gotten up to around 94 degrees Fahrenheit and one could clearly see the old dears are in a bit of distress. Naturally, the organizers had neglected to provide water for the public, and judging by the horrified expressions of the 2 St. John's ambulance first aiders stationed either side of the stage, things were about to get a lot worse. I climbed off the tower, found the rigging crew and ordered the sides of the tent raised. No sooner had I done so than our friend, standing nearby, demanded that the sides stay down because she was in charge and her instructions were to be followed absolutely, no questions. It was at this juncture that diplomacy went completely out of the window. I informed her in no uncertain terms, and employing a fair amount of Anglo-Saxon vernacular, that it was, in fact, the crew who had the responsibility of ensuring the health and safety of all the people in the venue. Not her. And that we have the legal authority to enact any procedure that we see fit at any time to ensure the safety and well-being of everyone present. I then informed her that I was now exercising my authority under the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974 to remediate the situation, and that if she made one single attempt to circumvent that authority, I would have her ejected from the venue without hesitation. She then got in my face and screamed, "I'm in charge. No strike 1, no strike 2, instant strike 3. I glanced over at two of our security crew who had been hovering in the background with huge grins on their faces, who then stepped up either side of her. Defeated, but complaining like a banshee with a terminal case of hemorrhoids, she was escorted off the premises in short order. By the time Act 2 kicked off, we'd gotten the temperature down to a more manageable low 70°F, much to the appreciation of our audience, and the rest of the show went off without a hitch. After the show, cast and crew, including our August star, repaired to the bar for a well-earned drink. Moments later, you know who appeared and in imperious tones informed us that our star was to be the guest of honor at a VIP reception for the various Docklands bigwigs. With a tinge of regret for having our fun curtailed prematurely, we said our goodbyes to our star. Now it gets interesting. Not 10 minutes later, she storms back into the beer tent with a face like absolute thunder. Taken somewhat aback by her reappearance, we inquired as to why she had returned. That ducking woman. She drags me off to this so-called VIP party. I get there and all that's there are 2 ducking plates of curled-up ham sandwiches and 2 ducking boxes of cheap wine from Sainsburys. How the holy crap did she get this job? I gave her a right bloody earful and came back here because I'd much rather drink with you guys. At which point she calls the barman over and orders a round for the entire crew. We spend the rest of the evening chatting away like old friends. She regaled us with stories of her life, and she was gracious enough to listen to some of ours. Despite us trying to buy her a drink, she refused point blank and picked up the entire bar tab for the rest of the evening on the basis that, "You've had to put up with that ducking evil idiot all week, the least I can do get you, folks, a drink." All good things must come to an end, and at the end of the evening, her chauffeur turns up to take her home. She embraces all of us like old friends, she hugs me, plants a big kiss on my lips and thanks me, whereupon I comment, "You have just fulfilled a boyhood dream." Again, that uproarious laugh. She looks at me and says, "Don't let that ducking idiot get you down. Leave it to me." I later discovered through the back channels some weeks later that our beat noir had been fired from her 5-figure job for her monstrous screw-up. Primarily because our star's agent had ripped the organizers a new one in very short order. You do not duck with someone of our star's track record without there being consequences. So, although we were not directly responsible for the Harridan's demise, we were gratified to have someone of our star's caliber standing up for us. Revenge is a dish best served cold. Thanks for listening.